Do you think that singing will survive in the future of reggae?
Well, the bird sings, and we and the birds are brothers. We are workers of the same army, from the same troop. As long as the bird don't refuse from singing, then we won't.
Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. The golden era of reggae music that was between 1968 and 1983 is celebrated as an untouchable epoch in the history of the genre. That was the pinnacle of Roots Reggae, a time when the golden generation took over the world and made reggae a global phenomenon. Despite limited resources, old poor equipment, and little or no money in their pockets, they achieved the impossible with nothing except outrageous talent, passion, and a burning, unquenchable love for the music. The arrowheads of that movement were the likes of the Wailers, Burning Spear, and the subject of today's video in this spectacular culture, an unstoppable unit that would over time become the yardstick by which Roots Reggae bands will forever be measured by. Culture brought unapologetic militancy, spiritual admonitions, and a fervent delivery that captured hearts on a global scale. The power of this group's universal acceptability rose to the surface when their classic 1977 hit, 2/7's Clash, became something of an anthem with the UK underground punk rock movement. But what I find most astonishing about this group was the previously unseen level of influence that their music brought to bear on real-life world events. The group's lead singer, Joseph Hill, would become like reggae's official newscaster, relaying riveting commentary on global issues, and was taken seriously by listeners like never before. Culture's music literally shut down Jamaica for a whole day and almost caused the government to impose martial law. Not to mention that Culture's presence during a civil war in a West African country caused the warring parties to declare a 30-day ceasefire to allow Culture's concert to hold undisturbed. The group would over the years amass a staggering and still rapidly growing fan base, put out some of the greatest reggae albums ever put to wax, and overcome huge obstacles to become one of the greatest and most beloved reggae acts in history. This has been a long time coming, but now let's take a look at the story of the magnificent Joseph Hill and Culture. Now this story begins with the band's charismatic frontman and founder, Joseph Constantine Hill. He was born in January 1949 in the town of Linstead in the lovely parish of St. Catherine, Jamaica. He was raised in a Christian home and was a member of his local church choir as a youngster. He displayed genius levels of musical IQ in his early years and made his first drum set out of a milk can and a small piece of his school uniform. Young Joseph attended the Jamaican School of Arts and Technology, but had great love for music that saw him start working as a DJ with the sound system in his hometown of Linstead after graduating from school. After he turned 19, he moved to Kingston to bring his musical dreams a step closer. He joined a group called the Soul Defenders as a percussionist, songwriter, and backup vocalist. And soon after, the band was hired by legendary producer Coxsone Dodd to serve as one of the backing bands at Studio One in 1970. Now at what was one of Jamaica's greatest studios, the Soul Defenders began to work with Studio One's illustrious clientele like Dennis Brown, Alton Ellis, Burning Spear, and the Heptones, to name a few. Working with these elite artists and producers, as well as staying under the tutelage of the great Coxsone Dodd, will sharpen Joseph Hill's many crafts and made him a master in the music business. But I feel the biggest influence on Hill was Winston Rodney of Burning Spear, after whom he would model his singing style and rhythm. The Soul Defenders left Studio One in 1974, and after a failed attempt at playing on the club and hotel circuits, Hill left the group and moved back to Linstead, where he began to study and eventually adopted the Rastafarian faith. He moved back to Kingston and played with different bands at night, while working a day job as a road sign painter for the Ministry of Works. Interestingly, the idea of forming his own band didn't occur to him until 1976 when he linked up with his cousin Albert Walker. Walker had been working as an electrician for a number of years, but decided to try his hands at music. He sold the idea to his cousin Joseph, who bought it quickly, and they soon recruited their friend Kenneth Days, who at the time had a day job as a construction worker. They first went by the name The African Disciples, but later on took the name Culture after a producer advised them to take a name that really reflected the seriousness of their lyrics. They were a very hardcore Rastafarian outfit with revolutionary and spiritual messages at their core, and they auditioned successfully for producer Joe Gibbs, who recorded and released their first single, This Time. A really good song but its apocalyptic and hard-hitting lyrics saw radio DJs reluctant to give it enough airplay, and the single would flop. But their second single, named See Them A Come, became a breakout hit and led to the recording of the debut album. For that project, Joe Gibbs employed the services of backing band The Revolutionaries, an elite lineup that included a young Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare, Lloyd Parks, and Harold Butler. The result was a 10-track masterpiece that was named 2/7's Clash. I personally rate it as the greatest debut album in reggae history, with incredible songs like Black Star Liner Must Come, See Them A Come, and Natty Dread Taking Over. But upon release in 1977, the song which got the most attention, it was title track 2/7's Clash. All of Culture's songs were serious stuff, but this one was on a whole new level and would foreshadow the kind of influence that the band would have over its listeners. The song was inspired by a Marcus Garvey prophecy of an apocalyptic event that would spark worldwide chaos and death. On July the 7th, 1977, 7777, or in street parlance, went 2/7's Clash. The single was released on June 22nd, 1977 and became a monster hit. But to crown its commercial success, it also had a huge societal impact as it sparked fear and panic all over Jamaica as that prophesied Judgment Day drew closer. And on July the 7th, 1977, everyone stayed at home in fear. Schools didn't open and banks and businesses were largely shut down, despite government bulletins and announcements assuring the public that all was well. And could you imagine that the army was even employed and placed on maximum alert just in case? The 2/7's Clash album also made a splash in the UK when it reached those shores, and was not only adopted as an anthem by the UK punk movement, but became the catalyst for the revival of two-tone reggae and ska movement in that country. After recording 2 more albums with Joe Gibbs, In Bald Head Bridge and More Culture, the band felt stifled and moved over to record with Jamaica's first female producer, Sonia Pottinger, and released 5 albums under her High Notes record label. This collaboration produced some of the best known works, including the sublime International Herb, Natty Never Get Weary, and Trod On. Around that time, British businessman Richard Branson, founder of Virgin's record label, was looking to recruit hot new reggae acts in Jamaica. He discovered Culture and got them signed to his label Frontline Records. And now with a direct road to an international market, they would embark on a slew of overseas shows. They were now officially among Jamaica's biggest bands and were given a slot in the One Love Peace concerts that held in April 1978. After a splendid performance, they would embark on a huge schedule of international touring over the next few years and would cement their place as one of the biggest reggae acts on the globe. However, the 1980s would usher in a period of trials and tribulations for the group, as dancehall would overshadow Roots Reggae, not to mention Albert Walker and Kenneth Days quit the group. So Hill would continue with Culture as a solo artist. But 4 years later, Walker and Days rejoined the group in 1986 and would record 3 more albums before the end of that decade. After a very slow 1980s for Roots Reggae and Culture generally, the 1990s would signal an amazing rebirth as the Roots Reggae revival began to emanate with new kids on the block like Luciano and Garnet Silk, spearheading what became known as the Rasta Renaissance. However, Kenneth Days quit the band again in 1993, but fortunately, it didn't halt the group's comeback. Their next album, One Stone, that came out in 1996, was the first in a series of amazing albums that poured out of the fertile mind of Joseph Hill in the 1990s. The album had immortal classics like Slice of Mount Zion, Addis Ababa, and Blood I Go Run. I personally rate it as a 10/10 album, and I believe it's almost, if not at par, with Bob Marley's Exodus and Touch's Equal Rights. And Culture would follow it up with Trust Me in 1997 and Payday in 1999. Payday in particular had a song titled War in Sierra Leone that recounted Hill's experience during his visit to that African country a year before. The country was in those times in the throes of a brutal civil war, and the rebel army were on the verge of staging an attack on the capital, Freetown. But when Joseph Hill arrived for his month-long visits and tours, the warring parties agreed to put down their weapons in honor of the Rastaman's presence. As the new millennium rolled in, Culture's tempo didn't slow down at all, as they would issue the year 2000's Humble African album, followed by the album World Peace in 2003. And in 2005, Culture would record the album Rasta, that would be the last recorded by Joseph Hill, before his sudden and untimely passing on August 19, 2006 in Germany during the band's European tour at the age of 57. His death was a devastating blow to Culture, but amidst the gloom, his son Kenyatta was chosen to become the band's lead singer, a role he took on brilliantly for the remainder of that tour, and a role that he still occupies till date, with the band still touring and recording as Culture featuring Kenyatta Hill. The great Joseph Hill, with alongside his comrades, will make Culture one of the most consistent, respected, and most successful reggae bands in the history of the genre, a feat that they achieved on their own terms, and in the process became the archetype of what a fundamental roots reggae band is supposed to be like. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, God bless.